Hi everyone. I've been asked quite a lot about using the Through the Forest stencil, and this is one of the cards that I made at the most recent show that we did. So I thought we'd run through how we've actually made this one. I'm sorry there's been quite a long time between videos, but I'm back now and hopefully we'll be posting quite a few videos before Christmas. So this is the card that we're going to create. So for this we've actually used the Light Up the Night set. And we've also used one of my favourites, which is the Christmas tree from the Evergreen Encounter. And one of the new ones, which is the Pine Panorama. And of course, our Through the Forest stencil here. So what you can see I've done, I've already masked this little stencil out. So this has gone onto a 7x7 card. Just because I think this works nice with a border. If you haven't got 7x7s, you've only got 6x6, you could use a little bit of tape around the edge of your card before you put your stencil in place. And that again will just give you that nice white border around the edge. So what we've done with this, because a lot of people ask me about bleeding under stencils and things like that, how to keep the ink off. So what I tend to do is run my removable adhesive on the back of the stencil. Remember, you can put in all these little bits here and just make sure you rub the adhesive off on the top of the stencil before you actually go to do any colouring, just so you're not picking up any adhesive. So what we're going to do is just start to blend the ink. So this is Morning Mist. I'm not going to do all this because we've got one that we've already done, so this doesn't take, excuse me, as long to show you. So basically we're just going to blend little circular motions, and you can see I've masked out the edge here, and for that I use Scotch Removable, which unfortunately we don't sell, but you can get that in numerous places. So you just want little circular motions until you've got all the way through this little mask. So again, we're using Morning Mist for this because I tend to find black is just a bit too dark because there's quite a lot of stencil here. And of course this adhesive that's on the back here will stop a lot of the bleeding through, and plus I've taped it down in the middle as well here, which again just holds it nicely in place. So once you've finished going all the way around here, like I said, we're not going to do all of this because you know how to put ink through a stencil, so we're going to leave it at that point. And what we're going to do is swap this over for one that we've already done. So if I just go back to this one, so here we've stenciled all the way through, and because I want to keep a nice white edge, what we've done is apply the stencil tape all the way around the outside of this stencil here. So now what we're going to do is start to stamp our background. So if I just take my Morning Mist, again, because the Morning Mist looks paler, it's just nice for distance. It's not quite as hard as black. So we're going to ink this up, and this is the first thing we're going to stamp into our card. So this is going to go just in the background here. So let's pop that about there. Like that, and just make sure you always walk your fingers around your stamp as well before you lift off. Give that ink some time to connect with the cardstock. So there's our first little background stamp here, and I'm just going to straighten that up on the card here like that. So because we've got all those edges masked up, we can just apply our ink. So I'm going to use a little bit of a mask here, and we're going to complete this little hillside. Now in the finished card here, what we have is the Christmas tree in this point here. So I'm not going to do too much dark colour in this area where the tree is going to go. So we're just going to start to add some nice sort of sunsetty colours just in that backdrop there. And you can avoid this reef quite easily. I mean, you could always, if you wanted to, just mask that area out. But to be honest, it's very, very easy to sort of miss that roof. And what I always say to everybody as well is, even if you get some colour on that snow, it doesn't matter because it would just look like you've got the sky just reflected in the roof of that snow. So just apply the ink, so little circular motions with your dry baby wipe. I mean, you can use brushes if you want to. I just prefer this technique because I can really pinpoint that colour. And we are going to darken this up later, so don't worry too much, because I always find where you've got some nice light sources that the black or the grey just works really, really lovely. to darken up the edges around that bright light. So just blend that in over the top. And remember, we're going to be putting our Christmas tree here in this area. And for that, we're going to use lots of multiple colours. And I really find that tree really fun to stamp. Okay, so let's add a little bit of red. And remember, you can always add a little bit more colour if you want to. So don't sort of panic too much. It's always better to underdo the colour than overdo it, because obviously it's a bit harder to correct if you put too much colour on. So just take some off if you feel like you've got a little bit too much here. And just blend into that yellow. So I think we'll come back and do a Northern Lights card, which is one of my favourites to do. And we'll use the new vintage bauble for that. So just a little bit of red just over here like that. And remember, the Christmas tree is actually quite dark, so we can put some colour behind here and not really worry too much about it. Okay, so there's the majority of our background colour. And we can always add a little bit more later if we want to. So the next thing that we're going to pop in here are a few little trees. So we're going to carry on this little bit along here. So for that, we're going to go back to the Chateau Grey, but I'm going to keep it quite pale because, like I said, we're going to be stamping that Christmas tree over there. So I'm going to off stamp that first, just on the side, so we keep that nice and pale. So you're just bearing in mind all the time that you've got that Christmas tree that you're going to be stamping across this area here. Now, I quite often don't have a plan in mind when we stamp this. This is quite a first for me, knowing exactly what we're going to be stamping and stamping where. So we just kind of make this up as we go along, which is a fun thing to do actually, I think. Okay, so there's our little Christmas tree and our little tree line there to finish our snow. So now we can start to add our foreground areas here. So the next thing we're going to do is put the tree in. So what I've done for this, because I want to keep this area here nice and clear, I've made a little mask. So you do that in exactly the same way that you would make a mask when you're stamping. So you just stencil through on a little bit of paper. So you've got a little bit of spare paper, and then we've added a little bit of the removable adhesive underneath there. So that will just keep that area nice and clear while we work. So now we can start to add in the details for our tree. So I'm going to go back to my dry baby wipe, and then we're going to start to add sort of a triangular shape of colour. So it's a bit like the bouquet technique that we're doing here, but we're just going to add little balls of colour. This is going to go about here. So I know my first bit of light source is going to be here. So the first thing we're going to do is add yellow for the light source for the tree. So again, if you think it's going to be too bright, especially with these yellows and these reds, just sort of ink them off the edge first. And we know we're going to want to do a sort of triangular shape here. So if it goes bigger than the Christmas tree, that's absolutely fine, because this is just going to look like a little bit of glow where that tree light is. So just off the edge here, like this. And we're going to do sort of messy balls of colour really. So we don't want anything too tidy really behind here, because what will happen is part of this tree is see-through. So where the little light bulbs are, you'll get just little odd bits of colour coming through. So now we're going to do some red in there. So little balls of colour again. So just over the top like this. And remember, this doesn't have to be too neat. We've already masked out the bottom here. So you sort of want it to look like glowing light. So you get that warm glow. And don't worry if you're a bit heavy, because that black is going to just cover that up. So rather than just do the two colours, we're going to start to go and add a few more. So I love the green tea. So we've just used Canary and Camellia. And now we're going to put in a little bit of green tea. And again, just little bits of colour anywhere you like. Just little balls of light. And I know at the moment it does look a little bit messy. But once we stamp this tree over the top, this is just going to look like a lovely warm glow. So let's go in with a little bit of peony. And just these little balls of colour. So you can see this is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And we're just colouring it over all of those little trees that we had before. So once you've got this sort of look here, which again, I know does look a bit messy, but let's just go with it. We're going to just blend that. So we're going to soften that up with our finger. Like so. And then the next thing we're going to do is to stamp our tree straight over the top of this. So remember, we've got our mask in the way here as well. So here's our lovely tree. I'm going to pop this straight into that corner. So remember to give this a good ink. It is quite a big stamp, but you'll see where we're inking up all those lights here, the lights are actually see-through. So what's going to happen is it's going to show all the colour through the tree, which is so pretty. So make sure you've given that a good inking. I always say if you think you've inked it enough, just ink it a little bit more, just to make sure you've got a good coverage. And again, with this one, you want to make sure you're holding this down and keeping that still while you work. So we're going to take it about there. So you can see we're just covering all of that light. And we should, when we take this off, have some little bits of coloured light just shining through where those little bulbs are. Okay. So you can see we're making sure that we press everywhere around this stamp, because sometimes if you've got a stencil underneath there, or you've got tape, or you've got paper, you can miss a little bit. And don't worry about that, because you can always sort this out. You can either do a little bit of inking around the edge, and there we go. So you can see all these beautiful little lights just coming through. It's one of my favourite techniques there. Okay, so let's get our little lamppost in. So for this, I'm going to use a little bit of paper here. So we've got a little mask that we've already made. And then let's just ink off the edge, just to give it a little bit of shading. So I'm just going to go for a little bit of grey. So back to our morning mist. And we're just going to ink off the edge here. And remember, we've still got our mask in place. We've left that on for the time being. And we're just going to rub a little bit of ink just off the edge here like that. And then this is where our little lamppost is going to go. So remember, what we've got to do first now is make sure that we've got a light source in place for our little lamppost. If our lamppost goes about here, then I know my light is just below these branches here. And remember, you can move this up and down a little bit if you need to make sure you're sort of covering the little bit of light that you've done. So you just want it to line up with that lantern at the top. So I'm going to go about there. And you can see we've just sort of gone off onto our scrap with the colour here as well, just to make sure that it's not too dark. We can always go back and add some more colour. And what we will do at the end is just add a little bit of darkness just around the outside of where all these lights are. And again, that is just going to emphasise the glow on these little lights. So once we've got the yellow, so that's your canary, we're going to go in with a little bit of the camellia, just to warm that up. And you can see I'm being very careful, but with your finger you can actually feel how much pressure to put on to get the look that you want. Okay, so there's our little light source for our lamppost. And now we're going to stamp the lovely lamppost just over the top here as well. Okay. So the same thing applies, just make sure you hold it down, and we're aiming for that little light source that we've just done here. So just about there. And we've used the nocturne for this, and the same for the tree, just so these sort of appear more in the foreground than the grey, and plus it enables you to stamp over that background as well. Okay, so let's have a look at this one now. And there we go. So you can see how much it stands out from that morning mist that we've just done in the background there. So it looks really, really pretty and effective. Okay, so now we've got this far, what we're going to do is add some little hills in the background here. So we're going to take that away, and that gives us our little snowy hill. But this bit here, this will carry on creating our snowy hills. So we're just going to take our wipe, and it should be, because we've edged this a few times, there should be some ink sitting in this paper. If not, I just go back to my morning mist and add a little bit more colour. And don't be frightened of sort of going around this tree and through that light, because I think it looks more realistic if you do that. Okay, so can you see these lovely little hills? So here where we've got this light, it really just does look like you've got the light sort of catching on the snow. So let's just go all the way down. And move your paper as well, so it's not the same every time. Like I said, if it starts to sort of run out on here, you can always go back and add a little bit of morning mist, but just remember, less is more when it comes to this, so you don't want too much. Okay, so just like that, all the way down. And then we can go back if we want, and we can add a few little dips here and there, like that, just for these little bits of extra snow. And it looks like actually we've got just enough ink on here to do this, so let's go about there. I'll add a little bit more. Okay, so there's our snow in the background. Let's just put a couple of little bits just in that back there, like that. So we've got a bit of shading just at the other side of the tree. Okay, so there's the majority of this done now. So what we can do is start to add our little animals. So we're going to fit in whatever we can here. So I'm going to put my little squirrel, I'm going to put my paper back in place, and we're going to try and fit him in just between the lamppost and the tree there, if we can. So I'm going to go back to my nocturne again. We're keeping all these little animals nice and dark. And we're going to stamp him just about there, like so. Okay, and even though they're small, just give them a little bit of time just to sit on your cardstock. Okay, and then what we're going to do is take our little, my favourite hare actually, so he's from On the Fence and I just love him, and we have got him coming out very, very shortly with a lovely little Christmas hat on. Looking a little bit different, I might add, but he is probably my most used little stamp all through the year. Maybe give or take Oriental Blossom. So this one is going to go on this hill here. So you could do this differently. We've changed it up slightly. But that's the beauty of these stamps. I think you can choose whatever you want to do. So I'm going to put some little bits of grass in as well. And we're just going to have them going around these little animals. So this is one from a previous collection. And we're just going to take off some of that colour first and just pop a few little bits of wavy grass just in there, like that. And if you want, another one of my favourites from the textures, some tiny, tiny little flecks of grass just there like that in the background. But you can literally do whatever you like. So there's our little hill. But what I'm going to do is add a little bit more colour just behind that. So we're going to just blend some of that ink in the background just to darken it up a little bit. Like so. And then we can take this off like that. So I'm just going to shadow down a little bit from where they are. So while they're still a little bit damp, or while you've still got a little bit of black on your finger, if you just pull down from where they're sitting, it just gives you a little bit of shadow. And if you haven't got enough, just go back to your grey. But just make sure you take some of that off first before you go onto your card. Then you can add this beautiful shadow and under your tree as well. Just like so. And you can also do it from this background as well. So if you want to add a little bit just up here, then you can do that as well. Okay, so I think we can take this off now. So this is just, so you see how nicely masked out and how closely that tree's gone. So you do it exactly the same way you would do if you were doing that with a stamp. So now we can add all our finer details on here now. So we're going to take our little berry branch here. And we're going to stick to the black with this because, again, we want it more in the foreground. So all we're going to do is stamp over the top of here. Now, we're using the little berry branch, and I'm going to just ink part of this up, so we don't want the whole thing. So I'm just going to take the finer details of this, and then we're just going to randomly start to stamp. Remember, we've got all our edges masked off, so we don't need to worry about those. And we're just going to let that stamp just do its thing. Just over the top, and it really adds this beautiful fine detail. If you get a bit on the stem, just wipe that off, because again, we don't want a really thick stem on this. We just want the fine areas of the branch. And I'm aware this does look very, very messy at the moment, but trust me, when we've done this should look lovely. And then we're just going to go around the edge again, and it's just adding to that foreground design. So just go over the top. And then what we're going to do, because we don't want all this white here, we're going to blend into that. And what we're going to do is use the ink that's sitting on top of this stencil to blend back in. So if you think it's going to be a bit too dark, you can take some of it off and just blend that back in. But I think this is going to be fine. So we're just going to take that. And again, around where your light is, just pull down a little bit And what that's going to do is just darken just around where that light is here. And then the same when it comes to the tree. Let's just go around, take some of these and just pull that down just into those gaps there. So it really makes the glow of that tree stand out. And takes some of this white away as well, which I think is much nicer. And I think we'll probably end up adding just a little bit more grey into this as well. So I'm going to turn this because I prefer to work in a downwards direction. So we're just going to turn it and add a little bit more colour just in some of these corners here. And again, we're doing this with the morning mist, so not in the black. So it's just a touch paler than the black. It's almost like you've taken black and off-stamped it first. So that's the sort of colour morning mist is. So I always think as well, if you don't want to spend too much money with the grey, you could always off-stamp your black first and stamp that there, which will give you the paler image. So it saves you having to buy a grey. It's always easier. I always think your first impression's always better, but it is a way round it if you don't want to be spending too much money. Okay, so there's our outer. So we're almost done now, but what we want to do is add our finer details. So for that, we're going to use our white fine liner. And shall we just take all this off first, because it does look rather messy. So let's get rid of this edging. And this is the one tape that I really love. It really just doesn't pull anything off your card. It's fabulous. So let's go off the edge there. And then just take these little bits off. Just ensure that your hands are nice and clean when you do this. Otherwise you're liable to put a finger mark somewhere on the edge. There's always a way around that though as well. We can always do a bit of shading. So there's our main card finished now. So what we're going to do is start to add all the little details. So if you've got a lovely one of these white highlighters, we can start to just add the tiniest amount of detail. But I always find it's these tiny details that really make a difference. So if you head for your lights, just put a little bit of a highlight on there, like so. And then if you want, you can add some little bits. I mean, I'm going to probably not go a whole heap on the detail here because I don't want to keep you any longer than is necessary. But we can add all our little snow details in here as much or as little as you like. But you see how lovely and white and beautiful this little pen is on here. So this is the Uniball, which is on the website as well. But you can see what a difference it makes. And here, what I like about this pen is you can blend it. So if you want to make it look like you've got a little bit of a snowdrift going on, you can draw this so onto your little glass bit here and then just blend with your finger like that. And you can also separate all of the little details from the back here like that with your finger. And also add some beautiful snow effects around here. Let's do a little bit of a snowdrift just here. Like that. And onto your little animals here, we can separate those as well. I'm going to put a little bit just on our little hair here. And on his little chest here as well. So you can see how beautiful this looks when you start to add in. And then on all your little branches as well and your little trees. And also for your snow, it's just fantastic. But if you just look how much of a separation you get as soon as you start to add on these little extra touches. So I'm going to go along there and do a little bit more highlight, but leaving that blended bit in there as well. Just blend with your finger. So then you can do your branches as well. So you can, I'm not too bothered about my light source. I know really it should be sort of either side of the lamppost and maybe either side, but because you've got so many light sources in here, say from your tree and your lamppost, it doesn't really matter what direction you take this from. So obviously you can take a little bit longer on this than me. Now your pen will actually work better once your inks are dry, which is why you'll see me just scribbling this off on the side occasionally. And then I'm going to separate just some of these branches. So again, this is working far better where you've got all your dark areas on your card. So let's just do some snowflakes now. Make sure you get some in front of your animals here. And again, just go along here and make sure you're getting some of these little branches here and some, sorry, the little trunk here. I'm just going in between and adding some snow. Like I said, we'll flick back to the original as well. And where your light source is, just make sure you've got some lovely bits of snow, because if you ever look out into the snow and you see a light source like a lamp or something, you always see most of the snow sort of around that area because it's all lit up. So if you're going to put it anywhere, just make sure it's in those light areas. And I always try and do at least 3 sizes of snow. So it looks like you've got some in the foreground, you've got some in the background, and some in the distance. And head for those areas that are really dark, where they're really going to show up. So like I said, you can do more than me. I always think it looks really effective the more snow you've got on here. But once you've got a few, then we can just dot over the top here, like this. So you could flick, you could use acrylic paint, you could use a bit of gesso. But I just like to be able to control where my snow is going. And then all that's left to do when we've done this is to put our glitter in place. So we'll revert back to the original to show you, because I did spend a little bit longer just getting all the snow in place. So I'm just going to do a little bit just underneath here, so where our little animals are. And then we're going to do some in this distance as well. I'm just doing it like a little pathway almost, just coming down just into where they're sat like that. And then let's just do a little bit of sparkle just in that sky up here, like so. And like I said, you can spend a bit longer on these finer details than I have. And we're just going to pop that straight into our glitter here, like this. Now you might have a little bit of tack just running around the outside of your card, where we've got the removable adhesive tape, but that will just sort of rub off later on. And there's your little finished card. So let's just compare that with one that we did earlier. So we've taken a little bit longer on that one and just put a little bit more snow and things on there. But as you can see, they're almost identical. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it's made a few things clear. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching. Bye.